You're listening to Jerry Royce Live Worldwide Podcast.
I want to encourage you that no matter what you're going through, what you have been through, or what it looks like, God has a master plan for your life. And He can turn your worst days into your best days. He will give you beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, and the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness. God will move you from pain to purpose. So you be encouraged on today. From pain to purpose, been through some tough times, but never stop letting the light of Jesus shine. I'm determined to pass through these tests and trials. I'm focused on my destiny and what God has for me. Been through the valley, been through the fire, been to the mountain, walked through the flood, but through it all, I'm standing stronger. God was there all along. Been through the valley, been through the fire, been to the mountain, walked through the flood, but through it all, He carried me, and now I'm finally free. Oh, pain to purpose. I'm going from pain to purpose. Oh, pain to purpose. I'm going from pain to purpose.
LA, let's get it. Making boss moves, that was his ticket. Till I got the call, I thought I lost it all. A mama broken hearted, a family feeling lost. Having faith, you see, we put our trust in God. We got D, long live the boss. He's got his angel wings and a fresh start. From pain to purpose, I got a new heart.
I'm determined. I'm determined. From pain to purpose, focused on destiny. I survived it all. I survived it all. From pain to purpose, walking in victory. Been through the valley, been through the fire, been to the mountain, walked through the flood, but through it all, I'm standing stronger. God was there all along. Been through the valley, been through the fire, been to the mountain, walked through the flood, but through it all, He carried me, and now I'm finally free. Oh, pain to purpose. I'm going from pain to purpose. Oh, pain to purpose. I'm going from pain to purpose. Survived it all. Survived it all. Survived it all to tell the story. Tell the story. Survived it all. I survived it all. From pain to purpose, walking in victory.
Been through the valley, been through the fire, been to the mountain, walked through the flood, but through it all, I'm standing stronger.
And God was there all along.
Been through the valley, been through the fire, been to the mountain, walked through the flood, but through it all, I'm standing stronger.
Oh, pain to purpose. I'm going from pain to purpose. Oh, pain to purpose. I'm going from pain to purpose.
You are listening to Jerry Royce Live Worldwide Podcast.
What time is it, listeners? It's Pastor's Time. I am Dr. Paul Kelly, praise the Lord, coming soon to Pastor's Time International Ministries on March the 20th, 2018 at 9:15 p.m. Eastern Standard on Positive Power 21.org, Worldwide Christian Media. The legendary ambassador, Dr. Bobby Jones. Yes, you heard it. Dr. Bobby Jones, known as Mr. Gospel, and Bobby Jones presents Impact Network TV. For 31 years, this gospel icon has presented a weekly television show that promotes his unique anointed musical genre. It was the largest running show in cable television history, a mainstream on BET, but played a larger role in the spiritual gospel greatness in the African American culture and our contributions to the gospel industry. Join us live in this honorable interview with the legendary ambassador, Dr. Bobby Jones.
Rock with Zion on Rock Life Live. It's a love thing.
Rock with me, rock with me. All right, my royal family, thank you for joining. Thank you for joining in tonight. I am so excited. This is Rock Life Live, a love thing, your 3-day fix. Thank you for joining and rocking with me tonight. I have a special guest for you. I have a special guest tonight. We have attorney Thomas Bundy. He is a family attorney. And, you know, if you have any questions tonight, I surely want you to call in and get your legal advice. But I certainly going to be talking to Thomas tonight, asking him questions about his road, his inspiration, what was manifested in him and moved him towards wanting to be in this particular field, and also giving an opportunity to understand the legal aspects of the law of the world versus the law of God when it has to do with marriage and divorce. So thank you very much. And do we have Thomas? Are you on the line here?
Yes, I'm here, Zion. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. So go ahead. Why don't you go ahead and tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Thanks. I'm here in Southern California. I'm licensed to practice in California and in Washington State. And, I think a lot of the motivation for me was, I think it's deeply spiritual. I mean, we know that God is just, and so we're called to act justly and love mercy and walk humbly with God. And so, growing up, I always just felt like the law was a place where you could really, carry out that command, and I guess in a really practical, direct way. And, I found that there's basically two worlds. You have people that seem to run in circles where they just have all kinds of lawyer friends, And then you have another world where people don't know a single attorney, and they call that guy for, criminal issues, family issues, tax problems, probate, all the issues. And so there's a real, you could almost call it a lack of access. It's not, literally true that the doors of justice are closed, but for all practical purposes, people just stumble around and don't know, how to advocate for their rights, or, and they just essentially lay down and accept whatever happens to them. And so, anyway, that's a lot of why I wanted to get into the law. So.
Wonderful. So, and were you originally from California, or where were you actually born?
I was born in Illinois. My parents are very poor. Yeah, they're very poor. So my parents kind of had this view of, get out of the rat race. We grew up without electricity, running water, phone, just grew up in a very, simple existence, trying to, be self-sufficient, if you will. And later they moved to the state of Washington out in the mountains when I was in junior high to kind of pursue that life. And then I went to high school there. And ultimately, when I left the home, I went up to Seattle to the University of Washington for undergraduate. And, of course, that's a big culture shock to go from the woods to the big urban life. And then and I would say that's actually where I started to take God really seriously in college. And then the church I was in, I got an opportunity to move to L.A. to be a part of, to actually directly into South Central L.A. This is a year after the Rodney King riot. And so we were working in South Central with Big Brother programs and midnight basketball and a lot of kind of youth outreach. And so, I was 21. And so I was like, this is a great opportunity for me to, before I pile on a lot of responsibilities that will keep me from being able to pursue this, I took advantage of it. And so I've been down here ever since.
That's awesome. So Chicago, huh? And how long have you been out in California now?
And you know what? It's literally 25 years ago today, March 19th. I didn't think about that. I arrived March 19th, 1993. That's crazy.
That's awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
And is your focus, is it mainly family law, or you do other things as well, as far as dealing with, I think it was something like something else you did. What was that?
Well, I have my own practice, and so to some extent, I'll take whatever comes to the door if I'm competent at it, if it makes sense. But the two biggest areas are family law and criminal defense.
Criminal law, okay. Now, when you look at family law and of course criminal law, is there one that you really exercise more than the other, or one that you appreciate more, or how do you feel connected in what you're doing? Like you said, the basis, the base of everything is through God, and that is something that, inspired you as far as, you were chosen to do a work like this. So tell us a little bit about your family law versus criminal law and what inspires you in doing, what you do in that aspect as far as your Christianity and relationship with God.
Sure. I would say this. My general view is that if you're in courts, that generally means something bad's going on, right? So divorce or child support, for example, there's a failure there, right? Like I tell people all the time, you don't need to get child support. You could just be a good husband, good parents and be supportive, right? You're going to court to get a child support order because someone's unwilling, they're hiding money, they're, whatever, right? Whatever the issue is, but there's some breakdown in someone's duties. And of course there's a breakdown when there's a divorce, right? With someone's abusive, cheating, dishonest, whatever, right? There's something going on. And obviously if you're in criminal court, you've either done something wrong or you're being wrongly accused. And so you just start with the premise that there's a wrong here. There's something harmful. And so, when you're in family court, there's a lot more of there's a lot more of an emphasis on trying to, like, can we reach an accommodation here and essentially take it out of the judge's hands, right? Like, I actually got a master's at Pepperdine when I was at law school there in dispute resolution, and it's a very Christian-focused program. It's the number one in the nation, and it's really based on the idea of can we be peacemakers? And, you know, when a judge makes a decision, someone's going to win and someone's going to lose. Whereas if we can say, hey, look, why don't we work to be almost a mediator, a compromise, and you know, it's not so much to make everyone happy, but really find something that both sides can get behind. And what I find is in the process, you really find where's the recalcitrant person, right? Where's the one that, like, if you have one person who's willing to, you know, concede or yield, and the other one isn't, you often find the person like, where's the, it's almost, you know, you can almost compare it to Solomon, right? When he said, let's just cut the baby in half, and he finds that the real mother is the one that's willing to concede, right? Who is, you know, but the problem is that war is, I mean, court is about war. You're trying to fight, and it's just a zero-sum game, and someone's going to win and someone's going to lose. And so, you know, and you can't, the bottom line, sometimes you can't avoid it, right? You can't make two people be godly or whatever, but and I think that, you know, the court does, in the best of scenarios, the court's doing the best that it can, right? And that's when there's no bias, no institutional problems. I mean, the court at its best is, you know, it's trying to, you know, find what's the best solution, but it doesn't always get it right. And so in family law, I mean, and I'll say this too, the other thing about family law is it's nasty. Because you really have people that are just dug in, and they're not concerned about what's best for the child. They're concerned about winning, and I hate this person, and they will burn each other's house down just to you know, get back to the other person. And you really have to try to keep them focused. Like, I get it, you hate her, you hate him, whatever, but you've got children or whatever, and you know, it's just. I mean, put it like this: people in these family law disputes are much more vicious than people fighting over millions of dollars in a civil court, right? It's just so much more personal. And so I try to do the best I can to, just you know, hey, let's not be personal about it, right? And try to do. I mean, again, it's very difficult in a family dispute. But then again, you can also point people to what are real duties. You brought children in the world. You have a duty. When you have people who claim some kind of Christian beliefs, it becomes even, I think, easier, right? Because as much as they want to dig in, you can really point them to God. You tend to disarm them. And you know, the thing with the common side. There's an old, you know, saying that if you're only going to defend innocent people, you'll just be an unemployed attorney. You know, that the vast majority of them are guilty. And, I mean, to some extent, that's probably not overstating it. But even there, you know, people ask you all the time, how can you defend someone when you're guilty? And essentially what you're trying to do is make the best arrangement that possible. Like sometimes I've literally sat there with the DA, and we'll have a discussion about, look, this guy's got an alcohol problem. That's really the basis of this. Can we get him treatment? Can we do something like that, right? Let's really get to the cause of this. Or there's some kind of psychological issue, rather than simply, you know, jail sentences, etc. And then, of course, when you find someone, like the issue you find is that people get overcharged, right? So people, they charge them with everything possible, and what you're really trying to do is take someone who doesn't know anything about the law and say, look, you know, they're afraid. They're afraid they have to just accept whatever the DA is charging them with, and you step in and say, hey, look, no, this guy did this. It's not that. It's a misdemeanor, not a felony, right?
But when you're looking at, you know, the family law, because you're dealing with a lot of different circumstances, you know, all the way from domestic violence, of course, custody, and you're dealing with, you know, issues. And like I say to people, a lot of times we have to look beyond just an issue and understand the spirit of the individual, because really that's what we end up dealing with. And even when you're looking at the court itself has a spirit in it. And not always the court makes the right decisions, or, you know, we also know the court can also be, doing criminal activity, I would say, because you can buy out the court, you can buy out the judge. I mean, these things can happen, and, you being inspired and God allowing you, put that into you to really be a help to those, praying in the position that people come that you really, truly can help. So my question, too, to you, I mean, you dealing with, say women in domestic violence or, people that's doing custody, and having that spirituality that you have, and really trying to help them because you understand your client. You can pretty much understand, like, okay, well, this person is dealing with a situation that they really are what you would say the righteous one, the one who really tried or whatever, versus the one that really was the one who was attacking or allowing the enemy to operate in them. Now, how do you, internally, because what I want is this is about a love thing, and how do we fix these things innerly, and you really fix the things innerly with people, by the Spirit of God in that circumstance. I mean, how do you go about it internally, how to work that situation?
So, let me say this. I have had a lot of clients, or I feel like we've ultimately developed more, essentially friendship, right? So it's not a mere, attorney-client relationship. And, it's not uncommon for me to at some point just be sitting down. We'll be sitting down, maybe during a lunch break, during court, or whatever, during some kind of a client meeting, and having a more serious talk about what you're calling some of the what's going on the inside, the spiritual things. And this is where I try to relate things. I mean, you and I have had discussions in the past, and I think I try to relate a lot of these things. The bottom line is this: when you're dealing with family law issues, generally, obviously, at this point, you're still mostly dealing with men and women, right? We're just now starting to get issues of same-sex couples and things like this, but with the opposite-sex relationships. And generally speaking, the problem, any issues of violence tend to be the men. It's not always, but it's the vast majority. And so there really is a problematic thing in America, I think, with men's disposition toward women. And it's true everywhere, I should say, but that's what we're dealing with here, is that men tend to be brutish, right? They tend to be, the thing that men characteristically do wrong is that they're abusive, they're violent, they use people, they're exploitative, et cetera, right? That's the nature of the things they tend to do, right? And so, I'm dealing with, I don't know how many domestic violence cases. And women tend not to have that. Again, you do have it, but it's rare. And cops tend to, and by the way, in those situations, the cops tend to underreact to them, right? Men tend not to call the cops because they don't want to report that they got assaulted by a woman. But they do happen. But again, dealing with the vast majority, there's a problematic disposition of men towards women. And you see it even in the Bible. There's a place where God says he's a father to the fatherless and a defender of widows. But that's gender specific. He doesn't say he's a mother to the motherless and a defender of widowers, right? Mm-hmm. And he really seems to see that there are men who tend to abandon their women and children. They tend to, and he's a defender of them because they are also, women and children can tend to be victims of the violence of men. And so a lot of it, I'll have conversations when I'm representing the woman who's the victim, having serious discussions about, about what men tend to be like and what are you, sadly, it's usually not the first time she's been assaulted by that guy or some other guy, And so, she starts to almost, not expect it, but she's not surprised that men tend to be this way. And obviously there are women who aren't that way. I'm talking here about the ones who have this recurring problem in terms of, who they find. And then men, and so you try to have a discussion with them. Again, this is beyond what's legal, right? This is not me giving legal advice to them or whatever, but, this is only in situations where I feel like there's, something of a more personal relationship that's developed where there's kind of space to talk about those things. and essentially that is, men tend to be this way, and so, how do you value yourself, right? And hopefully you'll never call me, right? Like I always joke that if people just listen like this, I'll just go out of business, but happily, right? But I kind of joke with women sometimes, like if you would just stop talking to men, your life would just be so much better. But I mean, that's an exaggeration, and that's not a solution. But I'm trying to exaggerate to make the point that there's a consistent issue. I don't. Here's the thing: I've never had a situation where I was representing a guy where I really believed he was the one who committed domestic violence. I'm trying to think. And I feel like they're falsely accused. And again, I don't know for sure if they were, but the situation was such that it seemed like it was a false accusation. And then there's a whole other problem is that people get in these toxic relationships and when all of a sudden there's a concern about fighting for the kids, one of them will make a false domestic violence report. And just as a matter of law in California, if you are convicted of domestic violence against the person that you have a child with, there's a presumption that you're an unfit parent that sits there for years. And so, it's a very dangerous weapon that people, they know about. I mean, you have people that don't know much about the law, but they know that, and they will make allegations. And so, and that hurts both the people who, if they've been wrongly accused, and it also hurts people who later make true accusations and that they're not believed, right? Because people will make these false reports. And so, I mean, I think your question is on point, though, that ultimately the only reason that we have these family law courts is because they're spiritual failings, right? And they're all internal, right? And so if people just regard one another, the way God calls them to, I'd have to go get a different job, but they don't. And so in any event, I try to really, when I feel like there's kind of an opening, kind of express what, people are fallen, and, you got to take into account, in the relationships you're building and what you'll accept. So I think they estimate that a woman has been a victim of domestic violence 9 times before she calls the police the first time. And so, it's just, it's regrettable, right? But he'll have her so, no one's ever going to love you, and, whatever. And so she never feels like she has anywhere to turn, or of course he threatens her with violence as well.
Yeah,
anyway.
It's interesting you say that, because when you think domestic violence or you think relationship and these toxic relationships, is that, when I speak to women in domestic violence and understanding that very clearly, is that when you have a person on one aspect that says that they love you, and they can show, expressions of love on one side, and then on the other side, they're having, this very rageful spirit, threatening you, and having all these qualities and spiritual things happening in them that shows that they are violent, whether it be verbal, emotional, mental, physical. A woman, it's like she's in a haze. Can't understand in her mind, how can someone say that they love me, even though they're saying that they kill me, they're just upset. Or they're just, and you start making excuses for that relationship and being in that. And the important thing, and I would like to ask you this, is that what would you say, because you've had, many domestic violence cases, when you look at the women that maybe you have, had their cases and so forth, would you say, what is it like, women that maybe you would say have maybe not assertive or maybe timid, or, how are they finding themselves in this type of toxic relationship? And sometimes you can find them doing it, getting out of one and getting into another one.
Right.
Would you have any advice or what you have noticed with the ones that you have worked with in the past?
Sure. I mean, it's not. Let me say this. Everything I'm saying about here, it's generalizations, and so obviously there's always exceptions. But I'm speaking here about kind of what makes the world go around. Like, here's what's generally true. So obviously, what I'm saying it may not be applicable to every situation, but by far the most common thing where you have a woman who seems to often find herself with guys who are either mentally or emotionally abusive or physically or whatever, is that they've often had very particularly bad relationships.
Podcast.
Zion, can you hear me? I have some interference right there. So. They've had really, really bad relationships with their fathers, whether it be completely absent, physically violent. They've been molested by some other authority figure who's a man. And so kind of what you were saying is that they've already had what you call kind of that confusing thing where someone who's supposed to love them, protect them, is already being abusive in one form or another. And so there's already this correlation. And so they don't reject it when they grow up like they should, or like you think that they should, because kind of like I've had people say like, "Gosh, I'm so frustrated with this guy. I feel like he never fights with me," and almost like he's not taking me seriously because he's not willing to fight with me and yell and scream. And I'm like, wow, So again, it's general. This is a generalization, but I seem to see there's women who have just no issues with domestic violence because they simply don't. However they do it, they don't attract such men. They don't, or if they do, they don't give them the time of day, and so they just never had this issue. And then you've got on the other side people who just seem to run into it a lot. And again, there could be people in between, but again, I'm trying to deal with it. It seems there's something, whether it's how someone's behaving or something in their past or whatever, that you'll have women who I've never had a guy put his hand on me, ever. And those who just seem to run into it all the time. And I mean, I'm not a psychiatrist or whatever, but and I don't presume that I can undo it. I will say this, that there's I think there's a certain kind of a psychopathy or whatever that comes along where you've been the victim of abuse by men because, you're supposed to respect, they're supposed to be people who are protectors and they are the people harming you, and you can almost associate the two, right? For example, you and I may have talked about this before. There's, every woman that kind of confesses to a time, at least in their life, if it's not now, with them, they're kind of like the bad boy, right? And they like this, and they think they're going to fix him, right? And so my own view of it is you have this instinct that God gives people, but women in particular, where to be nurturing and to be, caregivers and to, and which is perfectly appropriate with your children, but it's not appropriate for, a husband or boyfriend where you're trying to raise him and fix his problems, right? I mean, you'll get the extreme cases. You'll get a woman who will steal someone's husband, but she's convinced he's going to stay with her. He'll be faithful because, she's better than that last one, as if that was the problem, right? And so they'll genuinely, think these things. They'll have, women will generally telegraph what their worth is within moments, within minutes of meeting someone, and bad guys will kind of, they'll just here you go. I've got someone that I don't have to take seriously. I can see it on. I can, whatever. And here's the sad part. Again, this is what I'm saying. What's happening here is not legal stuff. It's just my own view of the society that we live in. And that is the sad part is that there are too many women willing to accept this bad behavior from men. And so, if a lot of women will put up with it. And if you're the one in, 1,000 that won't or whatever, the guy's not going to change because there's a line of women behind you a mile long selling you out, right? They'll put up with his nonsense right now. Mm-hmm. And so, so in that respect, the enemy of these women is other women who won't expect men to love their wives like Christ loved the church, if you will, right? Who will accept, someone who just pays the bills or whatever, right? So.
Yes, and I love that. Love her like Christ loved the church. What I like to do is we're going to take a break here, but you guys stay tuned because we're going to talk more about toxic relationships. We're talking about toxic relationships by way of why these marriages are ending in divorce. Why are we having two people who in the beginning said that they love each other and to death do their part, and to keep these, this law of marriage under God, but then end up in court. And why, what can we do about these toxic relationships? How do we get into these toxic relationships? And, and to as far as domestic violence, whether it's a man or woman, understanding that the one that is attacking the other person by way of being used to kill, steal, and destroy that individual, a lot of times we feel that the one who is getting beat up is the victim, when really the victim is the person who is doing the abusing. And to really understand that, if we're in these relationships, why are we continuing to be in toxic relationships? What is it we're not adhering to or taking heed to of the Word of God so that we can be in the relationship chosen by God to do through a great purpose in Him? So you guys stay tuned. We're going to talk more about that. And thank you for rocking with Zion and my guest, Thomas Bundy, and we'll be right back with you.
Her heart, a shattered and broken but sincere heart. It's so simple. She sees you, she needs you, but it's so hard. Has pushed her aside and now she's confused. She's suffering, it's so complicated, yet she loves you. How can you love the desire is driving me? How can you love? There's a struggle inside of me. How can you love? I can't even get close to you. How can you love me? How can I love you when I'm broken?
His walk feminine, even in the way he talks. His thoughts confuse those around because he wasn't taught. He knows better. His parents choose to pray, although it hurts. It's in God's hands. He's grafted, created this child for works. How can you love the desire is driving me? How can you love? There's a struggle inside I'm broken.
Unmeant to pour out my plan for you. I'll take you by the hand. I'm taking hold of you. You are my child, and you answer to me. I'll give you direction. You follow my lead. Your broken pieces, I'll make you whole. That's how I love. I'll take those desires that's driving you. That's how I love.
I'll take the struggle inside of you.
That's how I love. I'll always be close to you. That's how I love you. That's how you love me.
When you're
That's how I love. I'll take those desires that's driving you. That's how I love.
I'll take the struggle inside of you.
That's how I love. I'll always be close to you. That's how I love you. That's how you love me. When you're broken.
Environment. All right. Thank you for rocking with Zion. This is Rock Live. Rock Live, a love thing, a 3-day fix. We have here attorney Thomas Bundy, family and criminal law from Los Angeles. And we're here talking about toxic relationships, divorce, and how did these two, the two that say I do, turn out to say I won't. Thank you, Thomas. And if you will go ahead and let's expound a little bit more about, as you know, in the beginning, it's all about the ring and the wedding and the love and, just being in this cloud of, yes, we can go through this storm together, and just wanting to, biblically put in what's necessary, the root, what's necessary to start these relationships and understanding, what we're getting into. What kind of advice would you give to the audience or anyone that's looking to get married to, not, be in that situation where, of course, we want to make sure you get work, but then at the same time, we definitely don't want to see, relationships that do not last.
Sure.
What kind of advice would you give someone, to look for these kind of signs, or what would they should be able to do that, taking heed to the Word of God and applying to their life so that they will not end up in that court?
Sure. Okay. If I have a minute, I'd like to give kind of a long answer. I think it's true. Especially, by the way, I like this forum because I'm able to kind of speak more freely about what are really the spiritual issues, not just legal things. I have this belief that basically people get confused about desires versus obligations. We desire a lot of things, and a lot of those things are bad. Right? From the very beginning, the Bible says that, Adam and Eve, they saw the apple and that it was pleasing to the eye, right? And how many people end up in divorce because they saw something that was pleasing to the eye, right? Another man, a woman, pornography, whatever. Even money, whatever. They saw some get-rich-quick scheme, and they gambled their lives away, whatever, drugs. And so, the root cause of every one of these divorces is they put their desire above their obligation. Right? And so And so the problem is that I think today marriage by our laws and by our society has been so degraded that it's essentially kind of this desire on steroids. Like, I really, really desire you, so we should get married. And she's like, oh man, I really desire you too. But a desire is binding, if you will, is an obligation, because people go, your desires can wax and wane. I mean, you'll eventually get sick of Disneyland, right? You'll eventually get sick of chocolate, whatever, right? So no matter what you desire, you'll eventually get sick of it, right? And so the Bible's description of marriage, that you have two have become one thing. And so it's no longer that simply two people desire each other. They have an obligation to one another, and they are one thing. It's an interesting thing politically, but a couple hundred years ago, in I think the first state that initially attempted to legalize or to give women the right to vote was New Jersey. And I mean, hundreds of years, like even before Wyoming did. And it was interesting. The reason that they took it back is that people were complaining that you're giving married couples two votes when really they're only one thing. Now it's pretty fine that women vote. That's not the point. But that conception 200-something years ago that a married couple should be one thing, not two individuals, is interesting, right? That in that society you really see yourselves as one, not as two. And so by the way, this thing about desires and obligations applies to just any part of your Christian walk, right? When we fall short of being the sons and daughters of God, which is also us as our obligations, right? If you're a son or a daughter or a brother or a sister, you are that whether you desire it or not, right? It's an obligation, and we're a son or a daughter of God, whether you merely desire it or not. And so the point is that when you get married, you're making this vow, and the vow again is about an obligation. You're not saying I want to be with you, you're saying I vow to be with you, which suggests this is not always going to be something I want to do, right? You know what I'm saying? I mean, I'm talking about the day-to-day. I don't mean obviously in the long term. If you just don't want to be together, you may have made some mistake in the past, but by getting married. But I mean in those day-to-day things when you get tempted and you're like David up on the wall and he sees Bathsheba, right? And you put yourself in a bad situation. You still understand your relationship as an obligation, not as some kind of really important desire that you have made legal. And I think if people understood marriage in that way, and almost re-remembered it, right? I mean, I'm old enough that I remember as a kid, if there was a divorce in the family, it was a scandal, right? It's a big deal, right? Whereas today, it's no one gets married expecting or hoping to get divorced, but it's surprising. Wow, you've been together that long, especially here in Los Angeles, right? If you've been married like 15 years, like, wow, that's a long-term marriage. Whereas, you've got these couples who've been married 50 or 60 years thinking, oh my gosh, when I was only married 15 years, we hadn't even figured anything out yet, And so, it's interesting with what's happened in the law in the last several years with these questions of what is marriage and who ought to have marital rights. It really, I felt like is an interesting time to talk about what marriage really is. Like, why does the state even get involved in it all? And I don't think it's time to get into it here, but there really is marriage as such plays such an important part in just keeping our society together. But it's particularly, like, it's specifically apt for the opposite sex relationship, and God's known it since the beginning, right? We only need to know what God says to know this, but it's almost like we've forgotten it. But the bottom line is that men and women are not just that they're different, but that lifetime marital relationship is going to have costs, right? So there are costs involved when people get together, and those costs don't fall equally between men and women, right? We don't get to negotiate who gets pregnant, right? It's going to be the woman, not the man, if there is one, right? We don't get to negotiate. Generally, the woman insists on being the custodial parent. In fact, it's so, just to get into the family law stuff, it is so unusual for men to genuinely want to be the custodial parent that when I go to some opposing counsel and say, hey, well, my guy here, he wants more time with the kids, the other attorney will simply say, okay, how much does he want to pay in child support? Because they think that him wanting to spend time with the kids is because he wants to lower his child support. It's not because he genuinely wants to spend more time with his children. And that's, by the way, that's often the case. Right? I mean, it is sad, but that's also the case. And so, and so what happens? When you have a failure of marriage, the law steps in and says, okay, look, you guys have created these costs, so we're going to do our best with this worldly kind of court to shift those costs around. So, okay, he makes this much, she makes this much, custody is this much, and, whatever. So here's how costs are going to be shifted. But the truth of the matter is, even if you got a man who's really good about paying his, not for child support, he just pays his costs, right? He writes his check early. He's like the good guy, right? The marriage didn't work, but he makes his weekends, and he does the things that the law requires. He even does more if he can. Even in that situation, can we really say that he's fulfilling the obligation like that God would call for the relationship that brought children into the world, right? And so, but that's the courts, and that's the best we got, right? When the relationship, or when God's design fails for whatever reason. Again, I'm not suggesting it's whoever's fault, but the way that we fix it is so below what we ought to expect. And so, I guess if I could say back to your original question, my advice is that people stop being so concerned. Well, what about my personal, individual wants and desires and happiness? I think sometimes about our grandparents, like very few grandparents got divorced. Very, very few, right? And yet today people get divorced all the time. And are we to conclude that our grandparents are just much better judges? They just were better at picking people? Well, of course, what they got involved in when they got married 60 years ago was an entirely different arrangement, right? They understood, like, you couldn't just get divorced back then. You had to have a judge sign off on it. And so you had fault divorce. And so if you didn't have the violence, and if there wasn't infidelity, the judge wouldn't even let you get divorced. And so what does that do? You say, well, since we can't get divorced because neither of us is going to cheat on each other, and neither of us is going to be violent, well, I guess we have to figure out how to, be happy and get, fight differently and not threaten to get divorced. And so, the upshot is that some people say, well, yeah, but they stayed together and they're miserable. Well, I don't know that we can look at today's relationships of people in their 20s and 30s and say, well, now see, those are the happy people, right? It may be that some of these 70 and 80-year-old people stayed in some bad marriages, but I don't think that you can look at the relationships of the last 20, 30 years and say, see, now that's how you do it. Those are the happy people. They keep jumping from relationship to relationship, and they get out of this marriage because it's unhappy, and again, the next one. That's how you pursue your happiness. I mean, there's just simply no evidence. It's quite the opposite, right?
Well, truly, we know that anything worth having is going to be worth working for. And certainly, I want to really, first of all, let my royal family let you guys know that, like Attorney Thomas Bundy is saying, is that when you are looking for God to bless you in a relationship, understand that it's not based on a desire only. It's about a commitment. It's about obligation. Like I said, a price for success. It's going to be a cost in it. Even just like in our relationship with God, who is, Christ being the bridegroom. Even in that, he said Christ was made perfect by the things he suffered. So understanding that relationships, we're going to have some ups and downs, really is to prune us, to purify us, for us to come better, instead of bitter. And this is what's happening when we get into the divorce court. Now you have people that hurt each other, or hurting people, and instead of them taking those lessons and becoming better, they're becoming bitter, and they're fighting each other. And, this is, exactly what we want to talk about, a love thing. How can we get these things transformed? Like you said, transform by the renewing of your mind, the way you're thinking of things, the way you're choosing to think into getting into these relationships. If it's not working, the principles and the things that you're using to get out of these relationships. So you guys have to tune in next week because Attorney Thomas Bundy is going to be with us, and we're going to continue to talk about these relationships, and also if you have any questions for him next week, definitely get your questions together. We would certainly like to see if we can get some advice. We might be in a relationship. There's some things that we might divorce. We're not sure how we want to deal with it. And what I love about Attorney Thomas Bundy is that he has the principles of God, and he sends off even what him having to do this work, understand the principles. And, anything that you want to ask him, he's open, and of course, if you need an attorney or need someone or know someone who does, certainly I would like you to go ahead at this time before we go ahead and close and give them your information and how they can contact you.
Oh, sure. Well, my website is www.bundy-law, that's bundy-law.com. You can email me at thomas@bundy-law.com. Or the phone number is 909-281-3500.
All right. And I want to thank you, World Family, for coming in. And once again, thank you for watching the Science. It's a love thing. It's a love thing. Your 3-day fix. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to call us in. Next week we'll be here at the same time and same place. Thank you again, Thomas Bundy, for joining us. We appreciate you, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you, Zion.
Can you feel the power? Can you feel the power? Feel the power of Double XL.
Positive Power 21.org Internet Radio.
You are listening to Jerry Royce Live Worldwide Podcast.
All the promises of God are in him, yes, and amen. Believe it, receive it, declare it's my turn now. Believe it, receive it, declare it's my turn now. Put a dance on it, put a shout on it. Yes, it's my turn now. Believe it, receive it. You see, it's my turn now. Put a dance on it, put a shout on it. Declare it's my turn now. I'm walking on water. My faith is stretching. It's time for me to get my blessing. Can't quit now. Won't faint now. No stopping. It's my turn now. The word of God declares in the book of Mark, chapter 11. You can speak to the mountains in your life and command them to be thou removed and cast into the sea. Doubt not in your heart. Just believe it. Receive it. You'll see those things come to pass. We serve a God that can do the exceeding abundantly above all that you could ask or think. Just believe it. Receive it. And watch God move on your behalf. Yeah, I'm walking on water. My faith is stretching. It's time for me to get my blessing. Can't quit now. Won't faint now. No stop for me. It's my turn now. Living for Christ is the best life. He paid the ultimate sacrifice. Now there's God and join us with Christ. I declare it's my
Hey family, this is Paula G, and I am so excited because coming to Pastor's Time with Dr. Paul Kelly is none other than the ambassador of gospel music, Dr. Bobby Jones. Tune in March 20th to Pastor's Time with Dr. Paul Kelly as we chat with Dr. Bobby Jones. Can you feel the power?
You're listening to Jerry Royce Live Worldwide Podcast.